Picking first in your fantasy football draft is not the position you want to be in. You are the furthest from making your second round selection and are certain to miss out on a really high-end talent. But every few years there's a running back who won't just make you happy you're picking first, he almost guarantees you'll secure the bag. In the early 2000s it was LT, a few years after that was Adrian Peterson, and now in 2020 we have Christian McCaffrey. In 2019, CMC was week in, week out a fantasy stud. He finished the year with 471 points, which was second all time behind LT's 481. McCaffrey had the third most scrimmage yards ever with nearly 2,400 and was also the third player in history to produce more than 1,000 rushing and 1,000 receiving yards in the same season. No running back had had consecutive 100-catch seasons until he did it these past 2 years. He's arguably the greatest receiving back we've ever seen while still being absolutely electric on the ground. I mean, he finished 116 points higher than the RB2. How did Christian McCaffrey produce this record-breaking season? Usually, when we see running backs have transcendent fantasy years, they are attached to good offenses on good teams. This is because of what's called positive game scripts. When the team is winning, they will run the ball more to drain the clock, which gives the running back more opportunities to score fantasy points. Looking at LT or AP's most successful fantasy seasons, their teams always made it to the playoffs, so they were consistently operating with positive game scripts. One reason McCaffrey's so special is how bad the Panthers' offense was. The team finished 5-11, their offense was 20th in scoring, and after Cam Newton went down in week 2, Kyle Allen struggled mightily as the season wore on. The Panthers went 1-9 in their last 10. Poor game scripts nearly every week, but McCaffrey is completely game script proof. When his rush attempts go down, his targets shoot up. For example, in the 2 weeks the Panthers scored less than 10 points, he had 30 targets and 26 receptions. His ability in the passing game is what makes him a transcendent fantasy asset. Not only is he always open on check releases or Texas routes out of the backfield, but when the Panthers spread out the defense in empty sets and line him up as a receiver, that's when he's most dangerous. The Panthers are running a play we've broken down on this channel before. The name of the concept is Hoss H Juke. The HO in Hoss refers to the hitches, and the 2 S's refer to the seams. The number 1 receivers will run the hitches, the number 2 receivers run seams, while the number 3 receiver, whether it's the slot, running back, or tight end, will run the juke route. It's most famously associated with the Patriots. They like Edelman on the juke route, or maybe Gronk, and on this particular example, we have the brief moment in time when Antonio Brown's helmet fit and his feet weren't frozen, where he scores his first touchdown of the season on the seam route. So back to the Panthers version, we can see the outside receivers on the hitch and the inside receivers on the seam with McCaffrey in the slot. The Jaguars are running man-free coverage, which keeps a safety deep and brings 5 rushers with the other defenders in man. The only real hope of slowing down McCaffrey is shading a rat linebacker towards him or using an outright double. But if you do that, it all but guarantees one-on-ones for DJ Moore and Curtis Samuel. He's one-on-one with linebacker Miles Jack, and based on Jack's movement, McCaffrey's juke route has the option to go out, go in, or sit down if it were zone coverage. Since Jack is playing off, McCaffrey pretends to sit down, forcing him to close the cushion. The key to selling this route is CMC showing his numbers to Jack. If he doesn't commit to the full rotation or starts leaking inside too early, Jack won't take the bait. McCaffrey's short area burst is truly elite. He generates phenomenal explosion off his plant leg. Some receivers who try creating this level of explosion won't be as concise in their movement, but McCaffrey can instantly harness that energy to make lightning quick cuts. One reason fantasy football is so challenging is that it requires us to separate individual players in a game that is all about teamwork. Even though we receive points just for that player, it's imperative he operates with the offensive unit to create individual tackle success. McCaffrey understands the importance of each and every teammate doing their job, so he can do his at an unparalleled level. It's not just his physical abilities, it's his film study and preparation that make him great. This is a concept called mesh halfback rail, which looks easy enough when Nick Bosa has to peel off with McCaffrey, but what happens pre-snap is often just as important as what happens post-snap. As Greg Olsen motions inside, McCaffrey is yelling at him and pointing to the D tackle Eric Armstead. He knows from film study that when the 49ers overload the protection with 3D linemen and position linebacker Fred Warner on the other side, something is up. The 49ers have designed this pressure to induce the O-line's half-slide protection, which is zone on one side and man on the other. So when the right guard sets for Warner who isn't blitzing, the center can't pass off the spiking Armstead who's headed towards the -A gap. DeForest Buckner tries to pick the left guard in the B gap, which opens up the other A gap for Quan to get home. McCaffrey points this out to Olsen because he knows exactly what the 49ers are doing. Bosa's assignment is to rush like normal, but he also has peel responsibility in case McCaffrey comes out of the backfield. That matchup is a gimme for the Panthers every time. But how did CMC know what was coming? If we go back 1 week to the 49er Washington football team game, we can see a similar look from a flipped alignment. Buckner is now the one technique, and he switched with Armstead who's right next to him, and Warner still opposite the 3. Just like the play before, Buckner will spike backside, Armstead will try and pick the guard, and here instead of blitzing the backer, they twist D forward into that open A gap. McCaffrey didn't just see the overloaded front, but also the body positioning of the D line. Buckner and Armstead are massive dudes, but what makes them unique is their athleticism. The 49ers want to move them around as much as possible to utilize that athleticism. Often when they're slanting or looping, they'll start slightly cocked to the ball with their outside legs up. Now take a look at the two of them when they aren't slanting and are charging straight upfield to generate maximum power. Their feet are parallel, they're not cocked in one direction, and both fire straight ahead to hit their man. Remember, this is just 1 week later, so when McCaffrey sees Warner, the 3 linemen to one side, and Armstead's footwork, he knows where the pressure is coming from, so he tells Olsen to slide into the A gap. He's not sure if Alexander is blitzing or if Bosa is looping, but it doesn't really matter. Kyle Allen heard McCaffrey's check, so he knows exactly where to go at the snap, and the Panthers pick up 25 yards. These are impressive examples of CMC's receiving ability, and we haven't even gotten to his rushing ability, where last year he ran 287 times for 1,387 yards, 4.8 yards per attempt, and 15 touchdowns. Even though the Panthers had several O-line injuries, he still put up eye-popping numbers on the ground. The interesting thing about those numbers are his splits in zone versus gap concepts. When running inside zone, outside zone, anything like that, he had just 3.5 yards per attempt, but on gap scheme concepts, that jumped to 5.8. Those splits are similar to 2018, so the Panthers wisely structured their game plans to incorporate plenty of power, counter, and trap. In week 1 against the Rams, they're running trap from the gun. The concept is designed to leave a defensive lineman unblocked and pulls a guard to trap him upfield. This allows the guard Trey Turner to climb to the backer and the tackle Taylor Moton to climb to the safety. Ideally, the trap clears a path through the B gap, but the D tackle Michael Brockers uses a wrong arm technique, which means instead of rushing upfield, he jumps inside the pulling guard to spill the play towards his help, if it's there. Brockers penetrates so quickly, McCaffrey has to rapidly change his path to avoid the penetration. But here's why he's so good. Instead of panicking and making a wild jump cut into the waiting defense, he's able to make short, quick cuts to stay under control while maintaining top-end speed. Additionally, he always stays tight to his linemen, which makes it harder to track him and creates more room for him to work. He helps Turner by pressing the gap in between the two blocks, then explodes outside to the alley where the safety support is coming fast. CMC closes the space immediately, then jukes that guy out of his shoes, breaks 2 more tackles, and continues on his way. Even though his numbers and zone concepts aren't as good, that does not mean he can't make exceptional plays in that type of scheme. Once you give him any type of hole, he can blast through it or set defenders up to make it even bigger. This is the Panthers split zone concept. It's zone blocking with a frontside tight end coming across or sifting across the formation to create a lane for the cutback. Since the Jaguars want to create room for the slot pressure, they slant their line to the left, which happens to be the same direction as the run. McCaffrey's first read is the play side double team, and if that's clogged up, he'll begin working over to his left. At the mesh point, he sees Josh Allen slanting into the lane, and past him, linebacker Quincy Williams reading his movement. He knows his tight end is going to kick out Miles Jack, which will create a lane through the C gap, but Williams knows that too. CMC stays low while pressing the B gap, and sticks close to his lineman to hide him from Williams, who is anticipating the run heading back towards the wide open cutback. But McCaffrey knows his left guard is coming off the double, so he can set Williams up. Allen manages to get an arm on him, which helps demonstrate his change of direction, contact balance, and improvisational skills. He changes direction so fast, Williams doesn't come within 5 feet of him, and then he hits the safety with a dead leg and breaks another tackle. Fresh off this unbelievable 2019 season, McCaffrey is all set and ready to do it again. If the Panthers struggle with Teddy Two Gloves, that's actually better for McCaffrey's fantasy prospects since he adds so much value in the passing game. He's basically an RB1 and a wide receiver too. His target totals are just insane. His 142 finish ahead of Odell, Chris Godwin, and Amari Cooper. And think about this. Since entering the league, only Michael Thomas and Nuke Hopkins have more receptions than CMC's 303. Despite all these crazy stats, I will say there is at least the slightest room for concern in 2020. When we look at historical data, running backs who are coming off a season with more than 400 touches, and by the way, McCaffrey just had 403, the following season, those players on average received 115 fewer touches, lost a half yard off their yards per attempt, gained 720 less yards, and scored almost 7 fewer touchdowns. Don't get me wrong, that's not saying anything about McCaffrey's abilities or the Panthers' offense, but as fantasy managers, it's important we look at the full historical context to see how things have played out in the past. It's something to consider, but nothing too serious to worry about. Since he's so damn elusive, he doesn't take the same kind of beating as a typical running back. So for my projections, he's still a slam dunk at 1-1. Heading into this season, McCaffrey is just 24 years old. He is now the highest paid running back ever, is setting records left and right, and is ready to rock and do it all over again. Christian McCaffrey is a fantasy superstar. Thank you so much for watching this week's episode. I haven't gotten to talk to you guys in so long. As some of you might know, my voice has been damaged for the last 6 months or so, and it's been an absolute nightmare. But it's slowly starting to finally get better. I want to thank all of the Patreon supporters who have been helping support the channel. I haven't gotten to truly thank you guys in a long time, so really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much. If you like this fantasy style episode, I just put up my fantasy rankings on Patreon to help you prepare for draft day, and there's a ton of other cool stuff there as well. You get access to my all 22 college film database so you can study up on next year's prospects. There's playbook breakdowns, and we'll be starting up my weekly Big 5 picks against the spread, where last year we went 35, 19, and 1, and I know some of you actually won some pretty big money. So if you want to check that all out, the link is in the description box below. And once again, thank you all for helping me on this journey. All right, that's going to do it. Until next week, see ya.